So welcome everyone, and thanks for that, Talara. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're all located. If we're all in Darebin, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. It's been a pretty crazy start to the year, and this second lockdown, I think, is possibly going to cut even deeper than the ones previously. If you wouldn't mind, Erin, just popping your camera off, and I'm going to start sharing the material for the project in a moment. And so, I hesitate to describe our situation as unprecedented. It seems like such a cliche, and yet for many, it is actually a bigger social disruption than the GFC, which was in itself the biggest disruption that most of us have lived through for our lifetimes. So the Darebin Business webinar series is an opportunity for business owners to take some time to step back and try to think dispassionately about the situation in which we find ourselves. So just let me put up the material for the session. And so tonight's session is around think like an entrepreneur, and really focusing in on customer mindset. So a few of you filled out the questionnaire ahead of the session, so thank you for that. Gave me a little bit of an idea of who's got some experience with the concepts we're going to be talking about tonight, and that really helped. So the whole Darebin Business webinar series is really an opportunity for business owners to take some time just to step back and try to think dispassionately about the situation we find ourselves in. And being dispassionate is always a hard thing to do, because typically it's your passion that got your business going in the first place. Starting your own business is not easy, and if you're still going after any time, then that's passion driving it. And so trying to be dispassionate and objective about your business, it can be a challenge anyway. And then at a time like this, when it's so emotional anyway, in terms of the anxiety and the concern about when we're actually going to get through the COVID. So looking at your business can be difficult at first, but it's rarely a waste of time. And there's a really common metaphor that goes, you need to spend time working on your business as well as in your business. And so, that's one of the things that I want you all to bear in mind tonight. That specific phrase comes from a book by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth. And I'll just let you know that all of the references that I use through the session are going to be included. They're included in a slide at the end. But given that we've really only got about an hour tonight, then I'm not going to be able to make you all experts on these topics of customer journey mapping and value proposition design, but it will definitely give you some ideas on what they're about. Hopefully, I'll sort of pique your interest. And with all the references that I include, you'll actually have the opportunity to try the tools out for yourselves in the days that come. Now, if any of you do go and try and use these tools over the next week or so, and you do have a question or two, do feel free to send through an email and just refer to this session and ask a clarifying question. You're completely welcome to do that. And so let's start with journey mapping, and I'll just... So journey mapping, from the responses that people sent through for the questionnaire, my sense is that there are not many people who've heard of customer journey mapping, but it's really easy to find information, and a Google search of customer journey mapping will bring up a lot of really interesting information for you. And so customer journey mapping is a tool to provide better customer service and a better customer experience. As with the use of any tool, setting a clear goal or a sort of desired outcome at the start is the most important step. And looking at what it is that you want to achieve with the tool, or what you want to be different after using the tool, gets yourself in the mind frame of actually using the tool in a practical way, so that you're thinking about how you might use the tool as you're starting to learn about what the tool actually looks like. So what I'd like you to do is just to write down a couple of names of customers that you already have that you'd like to do more business with, or indeed the name of a couple of customers, a couple of businesses or people that are not yet customers that you would like to gain as customers. That will help to frame your thinking in terms of that very tangible outcome after using the tool. Just a couple of names, it doesn't need to be a long list. Now, one of the things that is often a bit tricky is to understand or to picture how your customers actually experience your products and services, because you're focused on, being on the, I guess, on the shop side of the counter. You're focused on giving good service, and so how is it that people actually experience your service or your product is something that people haven't necessarily thought about or had cause to think about. Sometimes having a complaint raised is actually a bit of a gift, because it forces you to look at how your product or service works from the customer's perspective. And given that they found something that they're not happy with about your product or service, it gives you an opportunity to fix it up. Now, this slide is just a really basic representation of the journey that a customer makes from being aware of both the need or the interest in a particular product or service and the fact that you actually provide that product or service. They go through a phase of consideration where they might compare what you offer to others who offer something similar. They'll have a look at your pricing and maybe your terms and conditions, and they'll decide that they do want to purchase from you. And so then they will actually buy from you. And then as they use your product or service, which might be something really quick, like if they've just bought a consumable, it might be really quick. Topical at the moment, as I was picking up my daughter from school this afternoon, I drove past a big sign that said a pack of 50 masks for $60. And so, if you go and buy a pack of masks from those people, the use of the masks over the next week or so, there might be something about it that either you're happy with or you're not happy with. And so that satisfaction step is around your chance to try and make those customers happy with your service and hopefully become loyal. So they might come back and buy more things from you, or they might refer you to their friends, both of which you would like. And so that advocacy step at the end, if you can find a way to satisfy your customers and develop some loyalty, hopefully they'll advocate for you. And so this particular version of the sales journey, you'll see at the bottom there, I've put a link or a reference through to where I've picked that particular map up from, which is off a LinkedIn learning course by Jeannie Walters. And each of the slides, as I go through them, will have those sort of links in them. So for your business, what customers or prospects do at each of those steps is obviously quite different. And so the purpose of customer journey mapping is to lay it out like this so that you can actually think about, well, when someone is looking for a provider, is looking for masks as an example, where is it that they go looking? One of the things that might actually surprise you is things like search terms. For any of you who've done search engine optimization, if you have a website and you might think about, well, what are the terms that people use when they go looking for the product that you provide? One of the things that might surprise you when you go over to the customer's side of the counter is you might actually find out that they use terms that are completely foreign to your thinking. They're looking for your product or service, or they have a problem that your product or service could solve, but they're looking for it in ways that you could never imagine. And that sort of insight becomes invaluable because you can maybe change the key terms on your website or in your marketing material, or you can change the way that you describe your product or service. So actually spending some time over on the other side of the counter in a very conscious and explicit way and stepping through these different steps can be invaluable. So what might that look like? Well, this is just an example of a pretty standard customer journey around a financial service, around banking. It describes an existing customer doing a quite specific transaction. And so, the different colored columns describe different stages of the process. So, at the start, it talks about that a payment needs to be made, going through actually keying in the payment, getting SMS confirmation that all the details are correct and confirming that you do want the payment to go through. And then on this example, there's actually right at the end there in the orange column, there's actually the opportunity to check in with the call center to make sure that if there was something that didn't quite look right, just call into the bank and just check that the transaction's all done the way that you wanted it to. So sort of the top half of the map is the mechanics of the process as you step through it. And the bottom half of the map is around what does the customer actually experience out of all of that. And so the top side is sort of your side of the counter and the steps of the process that you need to go through. And the bottom half of this particular map gives you insights as to whether or not the customer finds it easy or logical, in terms of user experience. The chart with the dots on it is sort of giving you a bit of an idea of how satisfied a customer is at each of those steps. And so the further, like the higher up the mark, is an indication that they're happy. And you can see right at the very bottom, there's the emotion emojis. And along with the dots that are at a higher level, you can see that there's the green smiley faces. And at the points where it's a very low level of satisfaction, you can see that there is the grumpy orange emoji. So that gives you a bit of a sense of how you might capture the information that you find when you do journey mapping. So journey mapping is ideally you sort of taking the opportunity to actually go over to the other side. Going over to the other side of the counter works best if you can engage someone who's already a customer or someone who you would like to become a customer, and you need to be confident that you're getting honest answers and that you're getting constructive answers. And so when you think about who you might choose to go on the customer journey with, it can help to pick someone that you hope will be constructive. A long time ago, land far, far away. A long time ago, I worked at Ansett, and one of the things that happened at Ansett soon after I joined was that about 1,500 people from across the business actually took a flight. We went to the lounge and we met a customer who was going to be taking a flight. And we actually sat next to them for the whole flight. Mine was from Melbourne to Adelaide. From the time that we met with them at the airport, we were just talking to them about what it was that Ansett was doing well, what it was that they were not so happy with, what might we do differently or better. And that was a real opportunity for me to go on the other side of the counter. To take all of my understanding of how the processes and the systems from inside the company worked, and to actually spend time talking with a real customer about what their experience of our service was. And so if you can imagine doing something a little bit like that yourself, journey mapping will work really well if you choose one of your key service offerings and you select one of your customers that you have a pretty good relationship with, and you spend maybe an hour or so. If we weren't all locked in our own houses, I'd recommend it's the sort of thing where you go and meet up with someone, that you buy them coffee, and you have a conversation about I'll try and go back. Yes, so have a conversation with them about, well, how did they find you? Why did they choose you compared to the other providers that they might have chosen from? And are they happy with the service that they're getting from you? You might even be able to ask them, whether or not they've ever referred you to anyone. Are they happy enough that they might refer you on? One of the things that I wanted to sort of talk through as we segue from journey mapping into value proposition design is this idea of your business as a customer satisfaction factory. Now, it's by, again, the reference down the bottom there, it's by a fellow named Ash Maurya. And Ash has just done some really interesting things, again, that I include in the references at the end. But I'm an engineer originally, and the idea of a business as a factory producing satisfied customers is just something that really resonates with me. And so if you imagine your business as a factory producing happy customers ideally, then the journey map is a way for you to actually think about how customers experience your service, and therefore what you might do differently at those different steps of the factory. How is it that you might make yourself known to prospects or prospective customers? How is it that you might make it really easy, especially online, in terms of people trying to sign up? I know, there are some businesses that make me give them so much information that seems irrelevant that, I often don't finish registering with a business for a new service and I go and buy it from someone else because they just ask too many questions or they just make it too hard to sign up. And so, even getting people to try your service, can be the first step in getting them to become, repeat customers and satisfied customers. So what I'd like you to do before we go into the value proposition design is to also go back to that list of customers. So when I asked you earlier in the session to write down the name of a customer or two that you would like to do more work with, or a customer, people or organizations who are not yet customers that you would like to be customers, definitely go back to that list, because having a really tangible objective will help you to think through how to approach it. So I hope that you've all written a couple of names down, because what I really hope is that after this session, that you will actually be able to take a little bit of time to do a journey map with one of your valued customers, and that you find a way to improve either your satisfaction or grow your business that way. That's really the intent of all of the webinar series, is to try and help you all to get ideas on how you might be able to take a little bit of control for yourselves in these really challenging times. And so it's about giving you some tools to take a little bit of a different perspective on the situation we find ourselves in, and hopefully give you all a little bit of confidence to be able to try some things that might help you to be successful despite the challenges. That's our hope. Okay, so let's move on to value proposition design. So this is a canvas. I do quite a bit of work with startups and with businesses that are growing quickly or hoping to grow quickly. And this is a tool that I just find invaluable. So again, at the bottom of the screen there, you can see where these tools come from. The value proposition canvas is one of the tools from the Strategyzer group, and they in fact have a number of tools. Another one is called the business model canvas, which some of you might have heard of, and the value proposition canvas basically maps onto the business model canvas. But the value proposition canvas is a tool a little bit like customer journey mapping to try and help you get into the into the mindset of your customers. And so on the right is the customer profile, that's the circle. And on the left is the value map, essentially. And so the idea is that you start with the circle and you think about, well, what is it that your customers are trying to get done? What gets in the way of them doing their job? And what does a great job look like? And so that's sort of the customer profile. And we'll talk through an example in a moment to give you a little bit of an idea of what I'm talking about. And so once you've got an idea of what your customer is trying to get done and what frustrates them and what a great outcome looks like, you get a bit of an idea of how you might help them to overcome the things that frustrate them and to try and give them a better chance of achieving a great outcome every time. And so the information and the ideas that you put onto the customer profile in the circle, the idea is that on the square, you actually are able to look at what attributes or features of your product or service will address the elements of the profile. So let's have a look at that. Cool. So let's use an example where if you imagine that you're the owner of a cafe or a restaurant. And so, what is the job that you're trying to help them to solve? I've put up there one of the jobs that we're definitely trying to help people to solve is being able to sort of feed yourself and maybe a family on a weeknight. So the way that I've described that job, I've tried to make it really quite specific. The key to being able to generate a good value map on the left in the square is to start with a really clear idea of the problem of the job that you're helping someone to do, or the problem that you're helping them to solve, or the job that you're trying to help them to do. And so, some of the examples of things that actually get in the way of feeding yourself or the family on the weeknight is that maybe you haven't had time to shop recently. You haven't wanted to go to the shop. Completely understand that at the moment. Or maybe you've been at work or on a conference call, and it's gone longer than you expected, and so now you're actually going to have trouble feeding yourself and or your family on a Tuesday night, on a Wednesday night. Here we are. In terms of thinking about feeding yourself and your family, what does a great outcome look like? It might look like having a tasty and healthy meal, a meal that's ready when everyone's available, and ideally that there's no washing up. I have one child still at home. I have a daughter still at home in year 10, and she's not too bad at doing the dishes. But a great outcome might look like hardly any washing up. So that's sort of on the customer side, what the customer's trying to do, a bit of an idea of what are some of the problems they might face in trying to get that job done, and some examples of what a great outcome looks like when they really get that job done well. So as the owner of a cafe or a restaurant, one of the ways that you can address that customer requirement is to actually offer your menu as takeaway. And I've been quite specific here around, at the moment, I sort of tried to choose a contemporaneous example. At the moment, there are some great restaurants. There are lots of great restaurants in Darebin. There are some great restaurants that are actually making their eat-in menu available as takeaway, or indeed issuing a special menu that you can either have delivered or come and collect yourself. And so I've called out a very specific product, which is them offering their eat-in menu ordered as takeaway and available for collection by the customer. And so Then when you've got that really clear picture of what's the customer need in the circle on the right, and you've then got that quite clear picture of, well, what is the product or service that you have that can address that need? This is where you look at, well, what is it about my product or service that really helps a customer with this particular job to get done? And so in the bottom there, being able to order online or by phone means that even if they have had a meeting go long at work, or they're still on a conference call, they're actually able to order from you, from where they are at work. So, that makes it pretty easy for them to access your product or service, even if they're facing the problem that we identified over in the circle there. And then, of course, because you're getting takeaway, you're not relying on what's in your pantry. And so it doesn't matter that you haven't shopped recently. You've overcome that challenge or that problem. And up the top there, what are the things about your product or service that will help them get a great outcome? If you're their favorite cafe, which hopefully you are, then the customer already loves the food. Whether or not it's tasty and healthy, it's almost certainly tasty. Whether or not it's healthy, it's around when it's a cafe that you normally eat at, then you want to eat that food anyway. And with regard to being able to have the meal ready when everyone's available, you can pick it up on the way home so that you get home at a time when people are ready, hopefully, to be eating dinner. And so it gives you a bit of an idea of how to use the tool itself. And so, again, as with the journey mapping, filling out the customer profile really requires you to have a good understanding of what is it that the customer is trying to achieve? What are the jobs that the customer is trying to get done? And so when I work with startup founders, for an example, I usually challenge a founder to think about whether or not they've really experienced the problem that they're trying to solve, whether or not they really understand those jobs to get done, whether they have ever been in a situation that would make them a customer of the business they're trying to build. Have they ever spent time over there in that customer circle? Because if you don't really understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve, then your product or service offering can miss the mark. And so again, when you go to do something like a value proposition canvas, it's invaluable to be able to work with someone who is already a customer or someone that you hope will become a customer, because they will be able to describe the job that they're trying to do in their own words. They can share with you what they find frustrating or annoying, and they can share with you what their idea of a great outcome looks like. And so the information that goes into that customer profile, you can be confident that there are real customers who have those challenges. Because if you're just providing a product or a service for a need that you imagine exists, like I say, it's easy to miss the mark. It won't apply to any or many of you, I can't imagine, but often when I work with tech entrepreneurs, they get caught up in building something. They're sort of focused over in the square, and some of the things that they use to determine whether or not they're doing a great job is, they look at how elegant a solution is or how efficiently something runs. And instead of thinking about whether or not their app actually solves the problem of a customer, they get a bit caught up in whether or not it's a great technological solution. And so always try and start your thinking from the customer perspective. That will always make a real difference. So this goes through what I was just talking about, and jobs to be done. There's some really interesting articles from a fellow named Clayton Christensen. Again, I put the references into the slide near the end. But jobs to be done they can be functional, like that collecting food or making sure that you've got food available to feed the family. That's a really functional job to be done. But they could also be social or emotional. The idea that someone might want to have a really good looking dinner that they can post a photo to Insta for, like that's a bit of a social outcome. Or if the tasty healthy, like if there's an emotional element to wanting to make sure that you provide tasty and healthy food for yourself and your family, that's an emotional driver. That caring, that focus. So jobs to be done can be quite different. It's easy to think about what the functional ones are, but again, if you have the opportunity to talk to customers, you can sometimes find out a bit more about why they chose you. What is it that your product or solution actually does for them beyond just getting the box ticked. As an example, the pains are negative outcomes, as I described them earlier, frustrations, risks, and obstacles. And the gains are, what does a great outcome look like? What are the positive outcomes, results, benefits, and even aspirations? And then they map onto, or they correspond onto the value map. And so, the pain relievers address the frustrations, and the gain creators help to deliver the gains. And so that map is something that is very handy. Okay. I've said a few times that it can be difficult to actually imagine what your service looks like from the other side of the counter. And so it really does take a specific effort for you to step outside of your business. It's easy to get caught up in your business every day. There's always lots of things to do, phone calls to respond to, accounts to reconcile. And so actually making time at least, I try and get people to do it at least fortnightly. Some people choose to do it more frequently, maybe weekly, and some people just can't fit it into their calendar. And I try and make sure that at a bare minimum they do it at least monthly. But that idea of actually stepping out of your business, so that you step away from the busyness and the operational day to day, and you think about how your customers are experiencing your business and what the opportunities might be for new products or services or to grow. You need to actually put that time in your calendar and be disciplined about not letting the day to day overrun that time to really step away from the business and get out of your business, get out of your shop or your office, and go and put yourself somewhere where your customers might hang out, so that you really can change your own mindset away from your business to try and get yourself into the shoes of your customer. Both of these tools can be used either for existing customers to try and think about how you might make your product or service more satisfying and try and build more loyalty, or they could be used to try and design completely new product or service offerings. So either tool can be used in either situation. So that's pretty much what I wanted to go through as a presentation. Just before I move on to the next slide, again, I just want to encourage you to go back and just make sure that you have written down the names of either some customers or some prospective customers, just so that you've got something really specific that you are going to try and do after this session. It'll just make the consideration of tools and methods just a little bit easier for you to think through. So okay, so here's all the references from out of the presentation. You can see there the jobs to be done, Clayton Christensen. A couple that I didn't mention specifically, but which I find really useful, is the product market or growth strategy matrix. And then also a lot of Jim Collins stuff is just fantastic. And the hedgehog concept is really applicable here. The hedgehog concept from Jim Collins really applies to, trying to really drive up your customer satisfaction and get that referral engine going for you. Well, thank you for your help, and thank you to City of Darebin for putting on the series. I think it's offering a bit of hope for people. So good work.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, and all the best in these trying times.